Bum bum bottom 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 bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum bottom ba da 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 ba da
You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
And I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the four-color realm. And in this episode, we're sharing Treasure with Magpies, watching anime with The Great Betrayer, and hey, let's follow that weird wolf kid into the woods. It'll be totally fine. In our Creator Corner, Tyler Crook returns to deep dive into The Lonesome Hunters, The Wolf Child from Dark Horse Comics.
Where we live, we're surrounded by the woods, or at least patches of woods. We're not like in a forest by any means, but we have access to trees. And the weather right now, unless Lisa and I are incorrect, is starting to turn. Like we can feel spring on the horizon, and that's super exciting.
If Punxsutawney Phil is to be believed, it's going to be an early spring.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily trust that person. All right,
that person?
That person, that hedgehog person. What is it? What is he? He's a groundhog?
I think he's a mythical being. A mythical being who lives in Philadelphia. Not Philadelphia.
Punxsutawney.
Punxsutawney.
Is that in Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania.
Where is that? But like that creature, you know, he's done us wrong in the past. And like right now also the weather in Virginia has been up and down. You know, one day it's like pouring rain and then it's, 70 degrees outside and then it's snowing and then it's, 40 degrees. It's our migraines, Lisa and
It's been insane. And our wardrobe, like what do you even wear?
Right.
Like our light layers are like 6.5 inches thick.
So I can sense, I think, spring as much as that groundhog can. Mm-hmm. And we went out on a walk today and I was like, this is it. Spring is practically here. Time to get excited for con season. And Lisa and I do our best planning when we are walking.
Yes, we got to be on the move.
And we have to figure out what our comic book couples counseling panel is going to be because it is this Friday at AwesomeCon at 8:30 p.m. in room 206.
I'm begging you. Please come. We would love to see you.
Now, Lisa, do not worry. I have gotten confirmation from 3 listeners that they will be there.
Yes, a plural number.
Again, I keep having flashbacks to the 2019 Baltimore Comic-Con where my dad and I attended this great William Stout panel.
A legend.
But there was only 3 of us in the room. It was my dad, me, and one other person. And William Stout should have a frickin' ballroom devoted to him, right? And for whatever reason, they didn't promote that panel in the proper way, and it was just the 3 of us and William Stout. And William Stout still went and did this massive retrospective of his entire career, but he was just speaking to the 3 of us. We all sat front row. He was up on that stage, and we just had like a little powwow.
I think that's wonderful, actually.
It was
kind of
wonderful.
magical for you.
It was magical for me. And he was such a mensch for doing his whole spiel for just us. And I don't know if he felt bad. Maybe we felt more bad than he did. But it was great and awful at the same time. And you know what? Like, we got to do at least what William Stout did for us, right? So if only 3 people show up, we're still going to bring it.
I feel like if one person shows up, we still bring it. But I feel like
what if there's 0 people show up?
I think we still do it because our friend Brian's going to be there and he's going to take pictures and we just won't do any like audience facing photos.
Right. Brian, just get So if you see only photos of us on stage, it means it was just
nobody
us on
came,
stage.
which is totally fine.
Which is cool.
I just go like, what is like, so if 3 people show up, do we just have them sit on the stage with us?
No, I think we do what William Stout did. All right,
just
everyone
have them sit
front
on the
row.
floor?
front
Okay.
row, and let's rap together.
Let's get into it. Well, because that's really what we want to do. We want it to be audience interactive,
Yeah.
where people are coming up and talking about their favorite comic book couples and all of that stuff. It's going to be so fun.
It's going to be fun. You're calling it a date night with comic book couples counseling.
It's going to be intimate.
It is at 8:30 p.m. on a Friday night.
Yes.
We're going to see. We're going to see. I've got my fingers crossed. But again, if you're listening to this and you're like within a 2-state radius of Washington, D.C., please get in that car. Come see us.
We'd really appreciate it.
If you can afford to do so and you have the time, please come out to Comic Book Couples Counseling.
Yeah, an awesome con is fun. You'll enjoy the con.
I mean, it's got some pretty epic guests there. Rosario Dawson is going to be there.
Which means, theoretically, she could be a surprise guest at our panel, right, Brad?
Yeah, you never know. It
Can you
could
hear
happen.
me winking?
And if you cannot make it to AwesomeCon on March 8th, but maybe you're on the West Coast and you can make WonderCon on the last weekend of March, you'll find Brad there. Sadly, Lisa will not be attending because, again, she must work, make the money to pay for me to go out there and have a great time.
I bring home the bacon.
For our Midwest listeners, you will be able to find us at C2E2 in Chicago on the weekend of April 26th through the 28th. And both of us will be there, and we will have another Comic Book Couples Counseling panel. More details regarding that when we have them.
We're still coming up with the details.
No, we're just waiting for C2E2 to give us the time and the date and the room number.
Those details.
It just feels really wonderful to start planning con season again. It's been too long since New York, and I'm craving that environment.
Yeah, like I have a hard time looking forward to something until it's in my immediate future. Like when it is over a month away, it's like it's never going to happen.
Yeah, we're very different that way. You actually just don't like planning.
I like to plan my way, which you don't like to do, or not at all.
Sure.
My way or the highway. And the highway means your way.
The first week of January, we buy a calendar, and I put all the cons that we want to attend on that calendar. And then I start talking to Lisa about those cons, and Lisa's like, yeah.
I just take them as hypothetical. Yeah, hypothetically, we could go to C2E2 at the end of April.
And that's great until you forget to actually take time off of work.
Yes, and I'm like, oh no, but I do it.
Yeah, you do it, and you're just like, peace out, bye.
Yeah, I just make it real awkward.
Luckily, you're an independent contractor, and we can explode our real life for our pod life.
I don't like to say explode. I would say I eschew my real life.
What's a shoe?
Bless you. That's dumb.
That's dumb. But what's not dumb is this week's episode.
What is dumb is that transition.
We are going full spoilers with The Lonesome Hunters, The Wolf Child, and we're bringing cartoonist Tyler Crook with us. Now, we've had Tyler Crook on the podcast in the past, but in those cases, we were tiptoeing around the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I think those conversations are kind of essential to understand the conversation you're about to hear, so there are links in the show notes. But this is a conversation in which we dig into the Lonesome Hunters and the Lonesome Hunters, the Wolf Child, and we really tear it open.
This is a full spoilers conversation, and I am so grateful because this is the conversation I've always wanted to have with Tyler Crook. I hated having to hold my cues back.
I like to think of these interviews as ultimate interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Think of this episode in the same way that we did our Dua Powerbomb ultimate interview with Daniel Warren Johnson, our Dan Slott ultimate interview with Silver Surfer, and our Chris Somney and Laura Somney ultimate interview with Jonna and the Impossible Monsters.
But I think this one is different and special in its own way in that the story is not over. The Lonesome Hunters is still ongoing, and depending on what the future holds, we're only a third to halfway through. So I feel like we're catching Tyler in this really special time where there are pages that don't exist yet. There are decisions that are not made. And even though he has a greater plan, there is still so much story to build, and being able to ask him all of my questions about the story thus far, like there are some things where he's like, I don't even know what that means yet. You know what I mean?
So that's your warning. If you have not read the first 2 volumes of The Lonesome Hunters, you need to do so now. The first 2 trade paperbacks are available from Dark Horse Comics, and if you've actually only read The Lonesome Hunters via single issue, you actually do need to pick up the new trade paperback of The Wolf Child, because there is a 4-page stinger at the back of the book that reveals more story that's significant to this conversation.
And we were in that camp. We had read The Lonesome Hunters via single issues, and we did not know that there was more story in the trade paperback until Tyler told us in the Zoom room, right before we were, like, when we were supposed to be doing the interview.
Yeah.
And so we had to, like, finish our homework in front of him.
Right. He emailed us the extra pages, and then we were like, Tyler, we're going to read this in front of you. He's like, well, I don't like this. So Tyler, like, looked away.
It was like my nightmare, because, like, I'm a person who's kind of self-conscious about her reading speed. And like, when I get, like, sentimental cards, like, at my birthday party or whatever, and I have to read them, I just, like, go, like, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Oh, thank you. Like, but I was like, I actually have to absorb this information.
I'm a little better at that than you.
Yeah.
I was able to absorb
I
the
did
short
absorb
story.
it.
Okay.
I did.
Good. Okay.
I
Good,
did. I'm just
good.
saying I've never read a Hallmark card in my life.
And I gotta say, I love the 4-page stinger at the back of the Wolfchild trade paperback. And I like this new trend that is happening, because the Enfield Gang Massacre trade paperback is also going to have a stinger short story at the back of that, just giving you a little more incentive to pick up and support the trade. This conversation is primarily about the Wolfchild, but Lisa, should we do like a little summary of what happened in the first volume of the Lonesome Hunters before we bring Tyler Crook into the love nest here?
I think that's a good idea.
The first volume is primarily about how this old man, this 126-year-old man named Howard, meets and connects with a young teenager named Lupe. They're living in the same tenement house, and this magpie creature possesses and ultimately kills Lupe's uncle, and Howard saves the day using this magical ancient artifact sword.
But Howard knows that when he uses the sword, it attracts forces from the past. His past, but also the ancient past. So they end up going on the run.
What I like so much about the Lonesome Hunters is you have this massive mythology that is propelling the narrative, but then you kind of have like these monster of the week things happening, right? The magpies in the first volume, and in the second volume, the Wolfchild. Both the magpies and the Wolfchild aren't necessarily connected to the sword and Howard's occult past, but they're indicative of this magical undercurrent that's always been there, but has been unseen by people like Lupe.
I just love watching their changing perspectives on magic, because Howard grew up knowing that magic existed, but he's been terribly burned by it. While Lupe has just discovered it and goes like, oh my goodness, the sword, it could fix literally everything in my terrible, terrible life. And the truth is somewhere in the middle, and neither Howard nor Lupe would be able to find that truth without each other's perspective. This is ultimately a relationship book. It's about 2 hurt people that deserve a second chance to find the magic of the universe.
Yeah, it's a comic book couples counseling comic, right?
Yes.
And that's why we're so excited to have this conversation with Tyler Crook. And we know from our previous conversations with Tyler that it is a deeply personal comic. So much of Tyler is in the Lonesome Hunters, and I think that's why we see so much of ourselves in the Lonesome Hunters. Before we get to chatting, though, Lisa, we gotta do some
referrals.
Sponsored by Omnibus. Omnibus is a modern digital comic book store and reader app carrying your favorite single issues, volumes, and omnibuses all day and date. Just like your local comic book store, you pay per book, but digital.
Their focus is on building an excellent customer shopping and reading experience and using novel discovery features to help fans find their next new favorite book. They feature top-tier content and already have many of the top publishers in comics today.
In the spirit of helping people find their next new favorite book, we have our referrals segment. The idea is to give our counselees, that's you guys, further reading on the themes of the episode. Think of it as us sending you to specialists to further your healing journey through comic books. I went first last week, Lisa. That means you're up.
Well, I am armed to the teeth with comic books. So I was inspired to pick Clementine by Tilly Walden because I feel like culturally we're having this open conversation about what's appropriate YA content
Yeah.
when circumstances like aren't doing that. Like
Right.
life and tragedy is happening to kids every single day.
Yeah, we want teenagers to have YA books to match a non-YA life.
Right. So, like, Clementine is a YA book set in the Walking Dead universe.
Yeah, based on a video game that neither of us have played.
And I don't feel compelled to
Same.
play because I don't play video games. But what I love about Clementine is that she is having teenage feelings, she is having teenage crises, and she's having to make life and death decisions every day. And she's being traumatized by a zombie apocalypse every single day. Growing up, like, this is a sad sentence, but it's true. Growing up and being traumatized happen concurrently. Like, there is no sparing. There is no sparing our youth
Yeah.
from how terrible and how scary and how sexual and how crazy life can be.
The Walking Dead is barely an exaggerated metaphor for a teenagehood.
Right. And Lupe, she is barely a teenager and she's already experienced violence and she's already lost her parents and she's already grappling with the mysteries of the universe, and she still has years of childhood left. She still has childhood lessons to learn. Like,
Yeah.
all of those things happen at the same time.
Yeah, and Clementine is a perfect expression from a solo cartoonist, from Tilly
Yes.
Walden, the same way that the Lonesome Hunters is from Tyler Crook. I love that pick, and
Thank
I
you.
am now jealous of that pick. Like, thematically, I don't know if my referral is as on point as your referral is. I went with The Changeling from Silver Sprocket Press and cartoonist Tina Lugo. This book, like The Wolf Hunters, has an ancient magical history that's hanging or hovering over everything. A long time ago, a human touched the heart of a beast, and that's how lycanthropes came into being. And The Changeling follows one particular lycan named Luth as they enter into their adulthood as well. They're on the cusp, and they have a dark destiny that they've kind of been cursed with. And so, like, how do you reckon with this future that other people are telling you you belong to?
Yeah, so I feel like that thematically goes.
Like,
That's it?
Yeah.
That's the ticket?
And again, Tina Lugo, like Tilly Walden, like Tyler Crook, is a cartoonist expressing something fully right there on the page for the reader, and is doing so in a unique style. Like, what I like so much about The Changeling is it's this very sketchy type of artwork. It's simplistic, but emotionally detailed, if that makes sense. Like, the acting is very strong with Tina Lugo, and the action, the movement is communicated perfectly, but with very few lines. I'm always, like, super impressed by that.
I want to read it.
Yeah. Well, it's on my Omnibus account. We have two different Omnibus accounts. So maybe
Omnibuy? Huh?
We'll have to talk to Travis about that. But you can share my iPad and you can read it if you'd like. Or
No, I'll buy my own.
let's do it. Let's support comics. Let's support Omnibus. Both of these comics are available currently on Omnibus. All you need is a browser. You do not need the app. All you need is a browser, and you can start shopping and browsing today.
If you have a browser, you have a comic book. Referrals. That's that's a local reference.
Oh,
If
yeah?
you have a phone, you have a lawyer is just for the DMV area.
Ah, well, I understood that reference. That's too good just to be a DMV lawyer ad.
I know, but now I feel like, because New York has the da 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 injury attorneys 8888, like they get that one, so
Right.
that's the best we have.
So this is some DMV pride,
Yeah.
that reference? Okay. Well, let's get Tyler Crook into the love nest and break down The Lonesome Hunters, The Wolf Child, out now from Dark Horse Comics. Tyler, welcome back to Comic Book Couples Counseling. Hello.
Hello, I'm glad to see you guys.
Oh, this is so exciting. We've done 2 conversations with you already about The Lonesome Hunters, but this is like the first proper full spoilers conversation. I hope you're ready.
I am so ready. I've been looking forward to this because it's really hard to talk about the book sometimes, and now I can just talk about it without having to worry about spoilers.
Well,
Yeah.
this is my dream coming true, because I always just want to ask all of the questions.
Yeah. And so, like, I feel to celebrate this event, this full spoilers conversation, I think we just need to go all the way to the end of The Lonesome Hunters, The Wolf Child to start.
Okay, you want to start there?
Because we've talked a little bit in our previous conversations about the larger mythology that The Lonesome Hunters sits within. And, in the last pages of The Wolf Child, we have this like godlike character. We're not even really sure. Nature-related character.
Yeah.
That has awoken and first awoke in The Lonesome Hunters Volume 1, the moment Howard pulled the sword out of the box.
And I refer to him in my notes as the sword's rightful owner. That's just what I call him.
I call him Little Deer Ears.
I think that's what I think the sword's rightful owner is like what he's the only thing he's been called in the book so far.
Right.
Well, they haven't given.
Well, and that I have to be careful with that because that's going to be a reveal down the road. So I don't want to spoil that one just yet.
I understand, and that's why I wanted to get
anything we haven't read yet spoiled.
Yeah.
Okay,
At the same time, I also don't want Tyler to feel totally comfortable. He's still got to ride that razor's edge of spoilers.
We ended our last interview with that Jack Kirby quote of like the questions were awesome or whatever. So the idea of like, how do you maintain a mythology that satisfies how great the questions are?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. Like, I feel like so the world and the mythology that they're in it sort of comes back to a feeling I have about stories in general. Like when we worked on Harrow County, when Cullen first pitched that story to me, it was set in contemporary Southern America. And after I read the pitch, I came back and I was like, this is amazing, but we absolutely have to set it in the 30s. Like it just is going to be so much better. Like the world is going to be so much more engaging. And it's because like, I think setting is something that is often sort of overlooked in a lot of the stories that I read, where it's like it's just sort of set in today and it's just set there sort of as a default instead of like being like, where is the place where we could set the story where the themes and the struggles of the characters are going to fit in that world and be sort of come from the world and react to the world in a way that helps move this story along. So the mythology is sort of based around how Howard and Lupe how Howard and Lupe fit in this world. And the thing about Howard and Lupe and how they fit in this world is that they aren't the movers and shakers. They aren't the Wolverines who are the best at what they do. They're not super powered really, so like this world that they're working in is this magical world that they don't fully understand. And Howard has we see in the first issue or in the first volume, he has done some studying. He knows about some of this magic stuff, but he doesn't like it. He doesn't really understand it. So the world is sort of just designed to keep those screws on Howard and Lupe, I guess. And the mythology sort of comes from trying to make the world feel bigger than Howard and Lupe, I guess. I don't know if that actually answered the question.
No, I love that, because one thing I found, like the most interesting thing I find about the sword's rightful owner is that they don't have the same sense of urgency and peril that Lupe and Howard have.
Mhm.
At one point, the sword's rightful owner says, like, a stone's awaken, but he's continuing to move extremely slowly. And he just says a stone. He doesn't say, like, the stone. He doesn't say, like, oh no, my stones. You know what I mean?
Yeah. My
So,
stones.
like, you know, I think especially with this book, what Lupe is going through, we are wondering, like, we start asking questions of, like, what's the meaning of death? Where do we go when we die? Like, who really actually has control over where we live or die? And we get the sense that it's connected to the sword, but, like, the connection to the sword might not have any of the answers at all. It's just like one more layer of mystery that is sealed off almost from the greater mystery. Like, you raise all of these questions in your story, and so we presume, oh, those questions will obviously be answered by the sword, but maybe not, you know?
Like by the end of the story, like I have to come up with an answer.
Right.
And I think and that's going to be the trick, is landing, and that's the trick with any story, is landing the ending. But so I do have an answer in mind for a lot of this. Whether or not people will find it satisfying will be something that'll be interesting to see.
When did the mythology form? Like, when did you start creating the engine to the character story?
God, that's a good question. I mean, it's really sort of like been brewing. Like, I started working on the Lonesome Hunters
Right.
in 2012, I think, 2013, maybe something like that. And it was so it'd been percolating for a long time, and it's like really hard to sort of pin down exactly what. Like, I don't remember if we talked about before, like the initial inspiration for Howard was an ad I saw that had Patrick Stewart in it, right?
Right.
And so that was like where he came from. But then I also had this idea for the sword's rightful owner long time ago. Just I really liked, I guess probably not a spoiler to say that he's very, very old, like he's ancient. And in fact, if we talk about the bonus story in the second volume trade, we can talk a little bit about how old things are in this world. But I really had this vision, and I don't know exactly where it came from, but it's the vision at the beginning where he's laying down in the wood, in the forest, and he's like clearly just been like laying in the forest for a while, and like just thinking about, if you were like a really, really ancient being, you could, lay down in the forest and just take a 20-year nap, and like and it would feel like a refreshing little afternoon nap, if like on a time scale that was large enough. So like that sort of stuff just was sort of based on thinking about that, and thinking about, I got really interested a couple years ago in deep time, and just studying like reading a bunch of books about the history of the earth and the time scales involved in that, and how they do the thing where they'll draw a graph, and it's like the first billion years was basically lava on the earth, and then like it was a bunch of stuff, you know what I mean? And like the humans appear in this very tiny sliver at the very end, and even like we'll think about these epic tales that encompass, our lives and our grandparents' lives and maybe our great grandparents' lives. And it's like, oh wow, look at this great length of time that, this family has occurred in, or whatever. And like, but it's really such a small thing. It ties back to sort of the larger world, is like just making Howard and Lupe be these little things in a big world was something that was really motivating. Again, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, it is answering the question.
Like,
and like, I mean, that right there, what you're trying to communicate is how massive the universe is, and how little that these characters can see of it. And that really is just, an extension of how we all feel already.
Right. Even while reading these two volumes, like I had to like really grasp, like they've only been on the road for like 5 days. Right. Like this is actually just like a really weird long weekend for them. But so much has happened. And like we on the outside who is reading the story, we've read it over, several months,
a couple years.
A couple years.
Yeah.
So like, that relationship with time, it really makes you feel how like nebulous it is.
Just talking about it now reminded me of a meme I saw where it's like a series of photos and it shows like North America, and then the camera zooms out and it shows you the Earth, and then the camera zooms out and shows you the solar system, and then the camera zooms out and shows you the galaxy, zooms out and shows you the whole universe, and then the camera zooms out and shows you like universes within universes, and there's Jesus on the outside and he says, "Don't masturbate." And it's like,
yeah.
that's sort of like the vibe where it's like these tiny people dealing with their tiny lives and their tiny problems, but they're within this like giant universe where it seems like it shouldn't matter, but it is
Right.
like it is important.
Oh, I thought you were.
That's like
no.
that's not my opinion on masturbation, but you know.
Yeah, no, but like it does make you think of like when you think this of the scale of everything, and then you go like, if God is creating the universe on this enormous scale, how could they possibly care if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl? Like how could
well
how
and
could they be at all invested?
And like just about every astronaut who's been like on the moon and looked at the Earth has been like, wow, holy crap, like we got our priorities totally wrong, you know. It's like having that global perspective, and that's part of why the sword's rightful owner is like so slow in going to get his sword. On the time scale that he's working at, he's probably feels like he's like really cooking.
In volume 2, we get a little bit more about Howard's childhood. We get a flashback to his childhood where he may be taking a sneaky peek at two burly men pulling a stump out of the ground, but he's also avoiding Bible study and reading geology. And
what a troublemaker.
I know. And then his mother comes in and scolds him for reading about geology instead of studying the Bible.
And burns the book.
So much of this time I've been thinking of Howard as kind of this victim who had the role of being this church's little chosen one. Now I go like, oh, well, the sword is a stone. And he's reading a book about geology, and he has this fascination with geology. And so I'm starting to wonder, like, is Howard still a chosen one?
That's an interesting question. I doubt it.
Because you're so in love with him being ordinary.
Yeah. Like I don't think that I don't think that this is a world that has chosen ones in it. Like,
but
it's
that
not...
draw to geology, though, specifically, is there a deeper meaning to that, or am I just reading into it?
That's gonna tie in eventually. That was one of those things where like it is gonna tie into like more thematically than literally, but it is gonna tie into, you know, the greater story. But the one of the main reasons why Howard is so into geology is because Lupe is so into anime. And I needed something for Howard to be able to share with Lupe in that same way. And the geology stuff sort of tied in. Well, you know, it ties in with like things that are very old and deep time stuff also, and like just the formation of rocks and stuff.
Well, you go back to that first issue of the Lonesome Hunters, and he is considering his love of geology and old rocks, and he likes old stuff like him. And I think thematically it underscores his loneliness, you know, that isolation that he feels as this 126-year-old man. Yeah, for sure. And there's there's another thing when I think about in a lot of my reading about like rock formations and stuff, like I've spent like way too much time just sort of like tripping out thinking about like all the planets out there, and this is gonna sound weird, but like thinking about all those planets out there where like huge mountain formations will form and then erode down to nothing, and like no conscious being will have ever seen it happen. And there's so much of that with like geology where it's like you'll find a really cool rock and it's literally the end result of 8 billion years of things happening to this little group of matter, and then it finally comes out and you're like, wow, it's like a little brown rock. Okay, cool. Or maybe it's a diamond, or or maybe it's this or that. Like there's just so much I don't know, there's just so much beauty in like geology stuff, and how and especially and there's like that loneliness where it's just like there's so much that happens that is really actually quite fascinating, but no conscious being
will ever see it or know about it. And
Yeah, you've actually just touched upon something that Lisa and I have been talking about a lot recently, the idea of stories happening out there without observation.
Yeah.
We talk about it often in terms of, when you close the book, we have the story that we know what the characters have done up to that point. But after that last page, there are pages that we don't have access to where their stories continue. And it's often those pages, those unmade pages, that are the most compelling.
Yeah, well, that's true, but it's also like, I don't know, one of the ways of how I'm structuring the trades so far, like a lot of the stories that you read in like a 4-issue comic will have like the climax, the final climax to the story will happen, and then you might get 2 pages to wrap it up. And I've been like really sort of setting the climaxes in like the middle of the first issue of the trade, and then or maybe not that early, but it's like the whole no, I'm
No,
incorrect.
you definitely.
It's like the climax comes early, and then there's
Yes.
a lot of time of them sort of like reacting to it and feeling the effects of that. There's a lot of sort of like, especially in my family, there's a lot of traumatic stuff, and the getting through that stuff, it's like it always sort of feels like there should be a moment where you're like, oh, I'm done, and that has never once happened in like real life. It's like you sort of start to deal with the problems, and then they feel much worse for a long time, and then they slowly taper off and you get better at it, and then but it never cleans up cleanly. And that's one of the things I don't like. I find frustrating about a lot of stories. And it's not anything contemporary or anything. It's just like when things wrap up cleanly and perfectly, it always feels like phony a little bit.
Lupe is our narrator, and you can tell she's still working out her past. She talks a lot about her past as she's dealing with the crisis of the present.
Well, and it's deeply informing how she reacts
Makes
to
decisions in the present. And like one of her big questions is like, how could I have prevented my mother's death? Like that idea of like death feels like a consequence. You make poor decisions and people die. And then, she takes the sword, she puts it in the wolf mother's hands, and then that wolf mother hacks up a bunch of farmers who were just trying to like, hey, stop eating our cows, And in the 4th issue is the first time where we get Lupe narrating the almost present. Well, actually, I guess it is the present in the story where she's like, this is a terrible day. I think about it all of the time. And for us, it just like, it just happened. And all of those other things that she talked about, like they haven't really been resolved either. Were you making a conscious choice of like, okay, Lupe story is this kind of conglomeration of her previous traumas, and now she's being traumatized like in the present?
Well, she's not actually, man, I'll have to reread that. She's still supposed to be speaking about it in past tense.
She does speak about it in the past tense. I'm just saying story wise, like, her traumas are like for us as readers catching up to the present.
Yeah. Well, the idea with the narration is that Lupe is actually telling the story to somebody. And I have a very specific somebody who she's like telling this to. Yeah, I don't know. Like it's her sort of ruminating on these events. So, but it also one of the fun things with that kind of narration is you can do the thing where where you're like, the narration starts out and they're like, the dog doesn't die. I just want to get that up front and then tell the story, and you can do stuff like that with Lupe's narration. So there's definitely some of that going on with how she narrates stuff. Yeah, I don't know what else to really say about that. Like,
well, I want to just go back a little bit to the pacing concept that you were talking about. When you're reading the comic in singles, I think especially when you get to that 4th issue, I think I was aware of like, oh, okay, we're wrapping up this Wolfchild story really quickly in the 4th issue, theoretically. You don't really dwell on it in the single. I think when you then read it as intended in a trade paperback, the pacing becomes even more clear, and you realize how uncommon it is to get to that last chapter of that story. Lupe the 3rd issue, she gives the sword to the wolf mother. fourth issue, Wolf Mother hacks up all that stuff, and then it's all consequence. Like the fourth issue is pretty much just reconciling with what happened in the first couple of pages.
Yeah, yeah, and that's I wonder sometimes if that's a weakness of the series, like because it is a bit of a slow burn, you know, sometimes where it's like the things. There's definitely a lot of comics out there that are a lot snappier of a storytelling thing, and I'm sort of like making sure that I'm building to the climax and then talking about what happened. And it does make, I think, I don't know, I don't want to be like, oh, my comic is so unique in this, but it does feel a little bit weird. Like it is like different from a lot of comics. I think.
Yeah, it does feel weird, but I think it's the reason why Lisa and I love it as much as we do is because it is such a character-driven story. It does deliver on these epic splash pages, you know, like the Wolf Mother with the sword is a haunting image. I also think about like the Lonesome Hunters Volume 1 with the magpie atop Lupe's uncle's head. You do get these moments of like, God damn, you know, which I would call like a 90s Image extreme moment. You know, like, so they're there in the Lonesome Hunters, but you never let them be the reason why we want the next issue.
Yeah, I guess that's because that's not why I want the next issue either, you know. So that's great that that works for other people too.
And the consequence is like when traumatic things happen, when the climax of the stories happen, the characters then have to go like, oh shit, okay, I'm now different. like they're looking around and they go like, oh nope, I'm a different person now.
But what I like about the Lonesome Hunters is it's, to me, what it's saying is that the action is not actually the climax. The plot is not necessarily the climax. It's how we relate to the action and the plot.
And then the character changing is the climax.
The final conversation between Lupe and Howard is the climax of the Wolf Child.
Yeah, it's like when the hobbits get back from Lord of the Rings and then they have to fight some dudes in their house or whatever. Like, and you're like, wow, they've been fighting these guys for a long time. But like, yeah, no, like there is definitely it's just sort of showing the change in the characters. And there's also the one of the smartest things about story, oddly enough, came from the or one of the smartest things I ever heard about stories, weirdly, came from the South Park guys who talked about when they're laying out story beats, it's always this happens. And well, instead of saying like this happens and then this happens, then this happens, they always say this happens, therefore this happens, therefore this happens. So like everything that happens is actually driving the next thing that happens. So yeah, and then a lot of that ends up having to have consequences that you have to talk about and deal with a little bit.
I love Howard and Lupe, but I'm also really enjoying tracking the motivations of the other characters. For example, we have our Crusaders are still out there, and we're starting to see even more like dissensions in the ranks, and like something I feel like,
but like you say, dissension in the ranks, it's like a look.
Yeah. Like, so to me, there's this huge character point where Michael, the like de facto like leader, because he's like the angriest, like, you know, saying like, we have to be open to like killing Howard, right? He's the embodiment of evil. We don't need to think about his motivations. We don't have to think about like what he's interested in. Like our job is to destroy the evil
and to send him back to hell.
And to send him back to hell. That was what we were told to do. And he's like, so get it together, Josh, the one with the soft face. And then he leaves and Josh is there and he sees all of the trash that the other Crusaders left and he quietly like clears it up.
Like what a metaphor.
And there is this kind of hyper masculine side of Christianity, I feel like I take for granted sometimes, or it's just like Jesus is so sweet, you know, he's meek and mild, you know what I mean? At the same time, like he's flipping tables and, you know, God is drowning the planet and like, you know, he's the decider, right? Like he's this like judgment guy. And it goes to the idea of motivations where Michael's motivation towards the religion is the ability to, you know, take part in judging people and being able to express this hyper masculine violence, where Josh's motivation is like, hey, this is we're taking the time to think about aligning our principles, and he does have this motivation to be good. Like that's like priority number one is like to be good.
But yeah, I think you summed them up really well. Like there's there's the three guys, and they each have have a specific way that they approach their faith. And Michael is definitely like, how can I use my faith as a tool to make me more powerful? And Josh is more like fascinated by the truth of it and wants to find, like exactly like you said, align their principles. And then the last guy, who, goddamn, I can't believe I've forgotten his name already.
Elder Olson is the third guy.
So he's sort of like he's sort of a member of the church who doesn't question anything. He's just like, this is what we do, we're always here. He watches these arguments and he's like, I don't really understand what we're arguing about, but I guess that's what we do.
Yeah. But now, like, the more we learn about Tina, she brings up this like third motivation. So I've discerned that Tina's grandmother is President Fuller.
That's true. And that wasn't supposed to be even.
That's not a secret.
But I don't know if I made it clear enough. Yeah, that's true.
Her motivation to get back into organized religion is to connect back with her family. Because of Howard, Tina feels she's become estranged from her family, and also and her mother has passed away. So she lost that connection. Tina's motivation to connect back with her family isn't in and of itself a bad thing, and Josh's desire to have a place where he can align his principles to the good, like that's not inherently like a bad thing.
Tina is definitely, I mean, she's one of the Lonesome Hunters. She's lost, in fact, one of the reasons why Tina exists in the story is as a counterpoint to Howard, where Howard left the church and was lonely, but would rather be lonely than be in that religion any longer. And Tina is like, no, I'd rather go back to this religion that I really don't know a lot about, that I wasn't raised with, as extensively as Howard was, but her loneliness does outweigh whatever she feels about the religion. So she's just trying to get back to something, and we'll see if it works out or not.
I never once considered that Lupe and Howard aren't the only Lonesome Hunters. I didn't even consider it. So now I'm going to have to read and watch for who are the other Lonesome Hunters. Perhaps Josh is a Lonesome Hunter. He seems pretty lonesome in that group.
Yeah,
he's not finding a lot of fellowship there.
Well, I don't know if this spoils the larger thing, but and so my favorite book, I think, I don't know if I actually have a favorite book, but if I had to say that I had a favorite book, I would usually say that it's The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. And I obviously took the Lonesome Hunter's name from that. But the thing that story does, that is one of my absolute favorite storytelling sort of structures, is that it just has this ensemble cast who are all dealing with the same problem, but they're all dealing with it in completely unique ways, and the solutions that they find work and fail in completely unique ways. And it becomes this really just beautiful meditation on the single idea. And in both of these stories, one of the main things that it's meditating on is loneliness, and how do we connect not only to the people around us, but the world around us, and how do we find a way to just to exist in this really weird world that we live in.
Well, and what you're doing also with the Lonesome Hunters is in sometimes in very short bursts, or just within a panel frame, you're applying a lot of empathy to each group, and that includes the Crusaders, that includes the hunters, and the hunters that are are protecting their livestock, and they just want to kill this wolf creature, or just this wolf as they see it. They're a great juxtaposition to those Crusaders. And because of my own biases, I think when they came into the story and one of them was named Brad, and anytime a Brad shows up in a story, I'm like, that dude's a piece of shit.
That happens with Tyler's in stories a lot too.
Yeah, exactly. So when they were injected into the story, I thought, okay, we have another antagonistic force. But through volume 2, through the Wolf Child, you realize like even the antagonistic forces, the magpies, the crusaders, the hunters, there's good there. You know, there are people there that are just trying to figure it out. Like everyone's just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it's kind of one of my favorite other stories like that is Princess Mononoke.
Yeah,
where it's like everyone in that story is trying to do their best, and sometimes it has very bad, outcomes, and sometimes it has great outcomes. Sometimes it has mediocre. It's like, and yeah, like it's definitely not a story where there's like a bad guy necessarily. I mean, there are characters in the story that I think are complete, woo.
Yeah, totally.
But like I'm not one of those guys who's like, I think that every bad guy has to have like a sad origin story or whatever. It's like sometimes their motivation is really that they're assholes, but I think in the story, like I want to have enough empathy for them to explain that they're doing this because they are assholes.
So, with all that in mind, when we get to the final couple of pages of The Wolf Child and we're considering the original owner of the sword, wielder of the sword, I think this was the first time where I was like, is that Satan? Or it's not literally, it's not Satan, but like, could they be a malicious force?
I did not think about that for 1 second. Nobody sits with a deer, protecting it as it takes a snooze. Is like a malicious force.
Yeah, I mean, like I think honestly, the way I feel, and again, we're now just pushing Tyler out of the conversation.
Yeah.
But I think when we again consider Tyler's point of view, now talking about Tyler in the third person, point of view about animals and how they just roll with it, and how a stone is awakening and things are going to happen as a consequence. That force, like the force of the sword bearer, could be considered just nature, and nature doesn't really have a good or an evil. But what if the character does have a morality that doesn't align with?
I would be shocked and disappointed because he's so cute.
Oh, okay.
Like one of the things I've been like noodling on in my life, how do we exist with this feeling of lack of sense of control over things? And this relates back to Lupe going like, how could I have prevented my mother's death? And sometimes I feel like we try to create systems to avoid bad consequences from happening, where like that's where our principles come from of like, I'm going to be kind to the person at Starbucks and I'm going to clean up the trash, like we talk about like, Batman doesn't kill people, like that's his principle, and because of that principle, like Joker keeps coming back, you know what I mean? Like religion or our relationship to the truth sometimes has more to do with us trying to feel a sense of control over our lives,
Justification,
a justification for but like like it's something we're doing like defensively,
yeah, no, like one of my least favorite things that everyone does at some point is the old everything happens for a reason thing. And man, I hate that. I mean, because of it's also a problem I have with the idea of prayer. Like if everything happens for a reason, then like Lupe's mom got died for what? Like to teach me a lesson? Like why did that happen? Or if it's about prayer, then it's like, oh, did I just didn't pray hard enough and it killed my mom? Like is it my fault then that I didn't do it right? But really, and it's just the thing where it's like I don't think that things happen for a reason, and I don't think that we can control events with our minds, and I don't think that we actually have as much control as we want, and it's like it's terrifying. It's so hard to live like that, but at the same time, the reason why I believe that is because it's easier to believe that than to believe that I could have stopped World War II from happening, but I didn't pray right.
And
so it happened to to teach me a lesson. That's the reason, like,
Yeah.
like I don't like being the center of the universe either.
The way I think about it is like, when I consider my principles, I go like, well, is that a principle I would uphold independent of the consequences? Like, I'm a peaceful person. Is there a situation where I would be violent?
I feel like I'm talking about more just movies and TV and books and stuff than my own book. But like there's a Doctor Who show, and God, I can't remember exactly how he put it, but there was some point where they were like, we could get rid of the Daleks, and Doctor Who was like, because the Daleks were going to commit some genocide, and Doctor Who was like, we could do that, but then we would be committing genocide, and we just don't do that. And it's like, and as a result, the Daleks come back every and for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess it's the same example as Batman and Joker.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is the best thing to do? And I do think that generally Batman's stance is the right one.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, because I feel like America in particular, we're obsessed with the idea of like realpolitik, and like, well, we did that horrible thing because the
math shakes out.
Yeah, the math shakes out. A greater good has occurred. And I think the reason we keep going back to stories like this is because we're really just exploring our own shame.
Well, like, that's what brings me back to Howard and Lupe, where like Lupe is still very much a child, and she is still working out like the principles versus consequences equation. And Howard instead kind of just like went into like principle stasis, where like he goes like, if I remove myself from the greater question, then I'm not at all responsible for the consequences of whatever my principles are or are not. And like, it's Lupe's existence and his desire to remain connected to Lupe that is drawing him back in to making these kinds of decisions, where he goes like, okay, I actually have to think about what I believe about the sword.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the thing where like Howard's Howard's coping mechanism is basically avoidance, and he's managed to do it for 100 years. And yeah, but as soon as the stakes involve somebody who he has this affinity for, he's like, oh, I can't. It's like I can avoid it for myself, but I see if these problems are affecting this person I care for, I have to actually get involved and stop that from happening.
I'm really curious how this will affect Howard's maturation, because a lot of our conversation the last time we talked Lonesome Hunters was like, Howard is still very childlike. He's still very much the age he was when his father died in a lot of ways. And I'm just interested in seeing like how Lupe is going to help him grow.
I'm interested to see that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they get to. I mean, that's the goal of every good relationship, is just mutual growth, and like you really sort of help each other become the next best version of themselves.
I think a lot about like eyes. Like, it's really, really helpful to have two eyes, because you can see in a whole other dimension. And like, and it's like the same thing with having a partner, like just having one other person, just a 2-person community gives the world so much more like dimension.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like you, especially like especially if your partner or friend or whatever has that different perspective. So they can bring a greater insight, and lots of times the thing in these relationships is that like you'll be going around within your life being like, I'm kind of a piece of shit, I'm kind of terrible, I kind of suck, and then there's this other person who you really admire who is like, no, you rock, and you're like, well, that person, like, I trust their opinion on just about everything else, maybe not their like opinion on which Chinese food to order at this restaurant, but like their main opinions. So like maybe there is something in me that isn't awful, and that's I think that's a lot of what Howard is getting from Lupe, is just this like, there's a person who, like, unlike those kids on the street, in the first issue, like Lupe is like, no, Howard, you're the person I'm going to go to when I need help desperately, even though I've barely talked to you in the lobby of our apartment.
And so much of the like organized religion aspect, like Howard's church is like, don't look. Like, why are you looking? We have all of the answers. How about instead of using both our eyes, how about we all just stand in one straight line and we look at the backs of each other's heads,
Yeah, exactly. Like the world, and the world opens up for both those characters a lot. And it's gonna open up for everybody by the end.
Last time you mentioned like the Lonesome Hunters contains everything that stresses you the hell out. Like you put everything that you like, your entire history and all of your worries, and you're putting them in this one story. And I'm just like wondering, like, is it helping?
It's exhausting. I'll tell you that. It is actually kind of hard. The idea behind that kind of was like, I got to a point a couple years ago where it's like, I was like, I really have to start writing some of my own stories, and I need to pursue writing. And because that was my idea when I first got into comics, was like I wanted to write and draw my own stuff, but I just really hadn't written enough to be able to do it at that point. But I'd been working as an artist for decades, so I was like, okay to do that part of it. So the idea was like, okay, I'm gonna start writing some stuff, and I had a bunch of stories that I was laying out, and the Lonesome Hunters started to like do this thing where it was like this huge sort of epic story, and it sort of got all these ideas, like there was a place to fit all these ideas and these things that I think about a lot. And everyone is like, the first story that you write shouldn't be your opus or whatever. And I was like, no, like I could die tomorrow. Like I need to like try to get to my opus. And it's like, it's been really challenging to try to get people to see my vision for this really big epic story that I have in my mind. Because to be frank, I'm not prepared to do it. Like you're never prepared to do the thing that like I feel like if you're doing a thing that's like worth doing, you're not prepared for it. You're always just sort of just beyond your own grasp. So I spend a lot of time working on this story feeling like it's just beyond my grasp to actually accomplish the thing that I'm trying to accomplish.
Does it feel like you've now elevated yourself to the form of a pure cartoonist? Like it's this hallowed term, and now you've reached it?
No, I don't think it's hallowed, but I do feel like I'm still definitely struggling with and this is like an artist's challenge on all levels, but it's like writing the story for yourself versus writing the story for an audience. And in my experience, the more and more I write for myself, the more it works for the audience also. And sort of a lot of things that feel self-indulgent or like too experimental or whatever. Not that I do a ton of like experimental stuff with my storytelling, but like the stuff that feels the most self-indulgent to me almost always gets repeated back to me as something that somebody enjoyed a lot. So I'm slowly getting into this place where like I'm embracing my more self-indulgent parts of storytelling with stuff, and getting a little more, I don't know if quirky is the right word, but just sort of not trying not to worry about like what fits the mold, and just sort of tell the story the way feels the most true to whatever I'm trying to accomplish.
Well, let's talk about
but it
that.
is hard. Like your some question, it is hard. Like doing work for hire jobs are like so easy compared to this.
Like part of my motivation for that, like, is writing about your stresses, is it helping? Is like sometimes with stress, it is really satisfying to just have like another person go like, I know, right? And like like that's what that's a lot of the satisfaction I get out of the Lonesome Hunters, is your stresses and my stresses, like to me through reading this book, feel similar. And so even where the times you go like, oh man, like thinking about the questions of the universe, like that's really like, it's really hard, like it's really stressful and it's really hard, and it's like like, and there are parts of it that aren't satisfying, and there are parts of it that are put you in this place where you're judging other people and all that stuff, like like, and I just read that and I go like, I know, right? Like, so are you finding more like, I know, right, kind of people through this
I am like the people who the story resonates with. I guess that's the I guess that's sort of meta, but like I guess that's the goal of writing any story, is
Right.
to like overcome that lonesomeness of these ideas in your head, and finding the people who think about the same stuff and are like yeah, we get it. We're you don't have to be lonely about that, because like everybody's doing that. And like there are things that like there is stuff and it's really it's hard to talk about without getting a little bit choked up, but there's a part of it in like one of the main things that Lupe is talking about in her narration in the second volume is just how she knows the answer to about what she could do to have saved her mother, and she just really hates that answer.
Mhm.
And it's like that's something that like resonates with me really really deeply.
Yeah, and
You guys are the first podcast that ever made me get all choked up.
Aw.
a
we
true
we just
badge of
caught
honor.
you on a
Yeah.
great day where you're feeling
Yeah.
vulnerable and you're willing to share, and we really appreciate it. We do.
So I want to get back to your self-indulgent side.
Okay. Yeah.
And I want to talk about the surprise that we get with the trade paperback of The Lonesome Hunters, The Wolf Child. And there's a stinger to this
Oh.
story that did not exist in the single issues. And it's like a little surprise origin tale about the Wolf Child.
Mhm.
How did this end up in the trade paperback?
That ended up in the trade because as soon as I finished any of these trades, my editor is always like, okay, send me all your sketchbook stuff and we'll put those in the back for everyone. And I'm not a big fan of those. Like it's funny, like I like seeing them, I like reading them, and I feel bad like wanting to like withhold that from the readers who probably enjoy it also. But like I would much rather have like more story in there than stuff. So I was like, I have time to do this, to do maybe a 4-page story. I did it in black and white, and it was something that I wanted to get into the main bulk of the trade, and I couldn't find a good way to fit it. So by taking it all the way out and just putting it as an end, you get a little like origin story for the wolf child. And even that doesn't really like answer a ton of questions, but it like one of the important things about that story is just that that's the first time we go back in time a very, very long time, like,
Mhm.
you know, longer than 100 years we go back.
For me, it points to the idea that there are probably way more people like Howard than we know about, like maybe even older than Howard. And
Mhm.
like the idea of like the line between the magic and humanity is actually like probably way blurrier than even
Thinner.
Howard. Yeah,
Mhm.
way thinner than even Howard knows. Where at any time, any mortal being, be it animal or I guess people are also animals. So like at any time the magic can reach out and include you.
Yeah. Well, and it also sort of ties back to a lot of the magic or in Lonesome Hunters comes from basically just force of will, and just sort of being like, I'm gonna make the reality that I want to make.
Now we have 2 trade paperbacks of the Lonesome Hunters, 4 issues each, and the first one left on a bit of a cliffhanger.
Bit of a
Yeah, a
cliffhanger.
bit of a
A
cliffhanger.
huge open-ended gushing.
The second one does as
Right.
well.
Mhm.
And now where I find my anxiety about this story resting is the next trade, the next arc of the story, the next 4 issues. Is that the end, or is it like part 3 of 12?
Well, I have two plans in mind, like, and it sort of just depends on what I can get Dark Horse to sign off on. I have a 4 trade plan, and I have a 6 trade plan.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're sort of working on that, and it depends. Like I haven't actually been able to get the third series approved yet. So hopefully like everyone will run out and buy this trade, and
Yes.
Dark Horse will be like, "Yeah, we love you now, Tyler." and I'll get started. And it's one of those things like I'm working on it now, but I'm sort of working on it in between other jobs, and like I guess the thing is like I'm gonna like finish the story regardless. And if I end up having to do it if I end up having to do it on my own, it'll be much more self-indulgent than if I have to do it through a publisher.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, now I don't know which
So-
one to pray for.
Yeah, I don't know either, to be honest. Like it's yeah, like I really wish like I could be like working on actual pages for the third volume right now, but yeah, unfortunately we have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think that's like a lesson that readers have to learn over and over and over again, where like all the power is on you, you know? So if you are enjoying the Lonesome Hunters, it's more than just like buying the trade paperback and buying the single issues. You really need to become a champion.
Evangelize. Go out and evangelize people.
Yeah. So if you're loving the Lonesome Hunters, like Brad and Lisa are, like you got to take to the streets and start buying this book for your friends and family.
Well, I was feeling kind of down about it until I saw some people on Blue Sky, like comic book creators who are much bigger names than me, just talking about how just incredibly difficult right now it is to get the word out about books and to get people excited about books. And it's just that there's so much change going on in the distribution, and online stuff is in absolute chaos right now. And it's just like it's really a weird time to try to get people to listen to you talk about your books.
Oh, we know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of noise right now, and then there also feels like there's a force to push against you. Like, you know, the algorithms of this universe have changed quite a bit in the last few years. And so again, like, to me, what ultimately is going to allow art to thrive are the people that make it, obviously, but also the people who love it.
Who buy
and
it.
If you love it, you can't just love it in the way that you used to love it. Like, I think we really do need to become advocates for the things that we want to see out in the world, as you know, the storm of AI comes for us all. If you want humanity to thrive and you want art to thrive, you need to
Participate.
You need to participate financially.
Yeah.
And that's a call for patrons. All right.
Yeah,
we need more comic book couples patrons.
I have such mixed feelings about that. Like, I don't feel like it's it should be the reader's job to be the marketing department for
right,
like my books. But goddamn, I appreciate it. Every time it happens, I'm like, I'm over the moon.
I feel like it's their job.
Yeah.
I can say it. We might
have a little time clock
that
at the front of the comic shop, like ching.
Yeah.
You're on the clock, buddy.
Yeah. Well, you know, like every now and again, I do a little time at Big Planet Comics, and it had been years since I had worked at Big Planet Comics in Vienna, Virginia. The last time had been before the pandemic, and then 2 weeks ago, I did one day in the comic book shop, and I was like, do I want to own a comic book store?
That's my dream. That's my dream, that me and Brad, we have a podcast studio inside a comic book store. But we also are two people who abhor responsibility.
Well, and we're terrible at math.
And
and finances.
Well, I don't know. That probably puts you in the top 20 percentile. Like, you don't start a comic shop
because you're great at
because
decisions.
you're really great at No, it's like, it's one of those things, like every level of making comics is actually hard. It's like, you know, writing them is hard, drawing them is hard, lettering them is hard, marketing them is hard, publishing them is hard, printing them is hard, running the comic shop is hard. But the thing that makes it so worthwhile is just everyone on every level does it because they love it.
Yeah.
Like, I've never met anyone at a comics publisher that was like, oh yeah, I got this job because I was really good at pre-press, and I thought, oh, maybe working at a comic shop or a comic publisher would be funny. It's like, no, they're all comic book junkies who are like, learn some related task and are like, I can apply this to the thing I love, and then they get in. Yeah. And you know, there's also like the line between being a comic book fan and a comic book professional is really like razor thin. I mean, you could put together a zine tomorrow and get a table at the next comic convention, and you're a comic book creator. You know what I mean? Like, it's wonderful.
We could all be the wolf child. So, you know, some publisher, before you know it, you're part of the magic.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
weren't even planning for it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's to tie it back to Lonesome Hunters. That's a little bit of the idea of that bonus story is just that it was like I've seen it in other people, and I guess I saw this in my wife when we went and played D&D for the first time. Like I came home and I was like, that was really fun. I had a really nice time. And my partner Maat was like, I'm gonna buy every book. I'm gonna study this. I'm gonna set up a weekly game with people. I'm gonna play D&D, on a regular like they saw that and were like, this is for me. That is for me. And that was the same thing as like the kid in that story. It's like he sees that wolf and he's like, that's me. I see it.
Oh man, that's awesome. I think that's a great place to end the conversation.
We still don't know if anybody's looking for Lupe. Like that's like a big open-ended thing for me because she's been gone for 5 days. Her uncle has been dead in the apartment for we don't know how long. He seemed like getting that watch back or using that watch was pretty urgent. And so like how long is it before someone goes like, didn't he have a kid? Like, like I do love the idea of Lupe just kind of falling off the face of the earth, like being the kind of person where she's so lonesome, like literally no one misses her. You know what I mean? So like that is satisfying in and of itself. I didn't consider it until this morning and I reread the first volume. And
I do have a solution for that, but I have mixed feelings about it too, because it's like how much of that it's like you don't have to like what's the example that everyone says it's like you don't have to explain how the little giga that Reed Richards pulls out and solves you don't have to explain how that actually works, like
the nullifier, the ultimate
you don't have to have an ultimate, you can just sort of like I think that might be one of those things we can hand wave, but I do have a solution for that. We'll see how much we have to talk about it so as we go.
Yeah, I always find another question. I'm like a bottomless well of inquiry.
Yeah, no, I'm really bad at ending interviews too. I always am like, well, if I stop talking to you guys, I have to go back to work.
No, exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Tyler, thank you so much for hanging out with us and talking about the Lonesome Hunters, the Wolf Child. The trade paperback is out now. Hopefully people listening to this conversation have it in front of them as we've been rambling on about it. And
we've definitely been putting it in people's hands.
Yeah.
Nice. And I've been telling everybody it's a Stampy Award-winning book.
Yeah, yes! Please do.
I can't wait till we get those Oprah stickers.
Yeah, I know we need those on that would be amazing, actually.
But for folks who want to continue the conversation, I hear you're on Blue Sky. Can they find you anywhere else?
Yeah, I am on Blue Sky and I am on Instagram. And I am on YouTube. I do a weekly live stream on Friday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific time, where I just draw and hang out. And those are the main things. Like I have a Tumblr that I post to occasionally, post to Mastodon occasionally.
Whoa!
But, I know.
I forgot that existed.
My main things are Blue Sky, Instagram, and YouTube.
And on that note, Tyler, have a great day.
Thanks. You guys too.
And there you have it, our conversation with Tyler Crook about the Lonesome Hunters.
Yay!
Actually, Lisa, that's our third conversation with Tyler Crook about the Lonesome Hunters. We should take all three of them and bundle them into like one mega episode.
Ooh, I would love that.
Heck yeah.
I like my episodes long and strong.
I like the idea also of turning it into a book of some sort.
Oh.
Just thinking about some publishing ideas, friends. And I know Tyler in this conversation said that it's not necessarily on the reader, the person who enjoys the Lonesome Hunters, to support it crazily financially. Like you don't have to buy 6 copies of the Lonesome Hunters. Like that's not on us to make sure that the series continues. At the same time, Tyler, it's on us to make sure that this series continues.
I think what Tyler is saying is like, in an ideal world, the onus should be on the publisher to promote a book. But like post-pandemic and paper shortage and all of that madness, like it's hard. It's hard to get the word out there. And honestly, it doesn't feel like clock in, clock out work to talk about a book that I love.
Well, I mean, again, for me, I egotistically think of myself as a comic book advocate. And when I encounter books like The Lonesome Hunters that have such a profound impact on me and help me better understand me, and I feel like it can help better understand other people, like people can get stuff out of The Lonesome Hunters, I want to make sure that I can get this book to as many of those folks as possible.
Yeah.
And I know that there are other people out there, because we've been communicating with them online, that feel the same way about the Lonesome Hunters. And I think for us, the fans of the Lonesome Hunters, like there is like responsibility is maybe like too strong of a word, but there is an opportunity for us to get this book into more hands and for this book to continue. And that opportunity right now seems to rest on the sales figures of volume 2 of the Lonesome Hunters, The Wolf Child.
There's also just a lot of noise out there. There's like other comics competing for the same space, and there are also video games and movies and everything, and like
YouTube.
Yeah.
TikTok.
And we want the Lonesome Hunters conversation also to have space, and I don't mind fighting for that space.
You don't mind it, you actually enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, we do have a podcast.
That's right. And I hope everyone listening enjoyed this conversation as well.
And I feel like the podcast is also like how the magic touches us. You know what
say
I mean?
more.
Like, you know, Tyler talked about how people who are passionate about comics often stumble into making comics. And I made that parallel to the Wolf Child and how the Wolf Child was just like this mortal child, and all of a sudden they're touched by the magic and they're this immortal being. And I feel like us creating comic book couples counseling is like our way of like
Our way in?
Our way
of touching the magic?
Yeah, it's our way of touching the magic and
That is 100% true.
Yeah.
That is 100% true. So I guess that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know. Hit us up on all the socials. Our next episode will be actually another Ultimate Creator interview, this time with Tom King talking about Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow.
Yes.
Very excited to have that conversation. It hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen in 48 hours. And right now, Lisa and I are poring over that comic that he did with Bilquis Evely. And, you know, we're anticipating the release of Helen of Windhorn, #1, also from Dark Horse Comics. And Lisa and I got a chance to read that first issue, and I think it's probably the best first issue of 2024 so far, and will absolutely be in conversation for the Stampies come the end of the year. After that will be our next Schema episode, our Scott Summers and Emma Frost counseling session. That conversation will circle around Avengers versus X-Men. We've been promising that episode for a little while, but it's migraine season.
Yeah.
It's been getting in the way of a few things. Plus, also, have you heard about this comic book couples counseling panel that's going to be happening on March 8th at AwesomeCon? Please
Furiously prepping.
come see us in room 206 at 8:30 p.m. And we also recently announced our next comic book film club at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia. It will be Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy on March 17th at 4 p.m. It's the 20th anniversary of that film, which is nuts.
Hopefully you've seen our adorable poster made by Mark Jackson, friend of the pod.
We'll be giving those out at the screening, and if you're a patron, you actually get into the screening for free.
Yes.
You just have to let us know. And we may even have a few of those posters left over to give out at AwesomeCon. Maybe people who ask questions at the panel can get a Mark Jackson Hellboy poster.
Okay, Brad. You've got the first aid kit. We're going into the woods. Where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
You can find me on most social medias at MouthDork. If you have some words of affirmation for our logo, you can send them to Aaron Prescott at A Cool Hand Fluke. And if you have some words of affirmation for our Radical banner art and show poster, send them to Karen Chapp at Karen_X-Men fan. Lisa, where can our listeners send the words of affirmation to you?
I'm always accepting words of affirmation at Sidewalk Siren on Instagram and Twitter. If you'd like to spend more quality time with us, you can subscribe to us on Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Apple Podcasts, or whatever app you prefer. We're everywhere. And if you'd like to get exclusive, you can join our Patreon, where you'll get more content, including weekly bonus episodes.
If you'd like to reach out and touch us electronically, you can email the podcast, cbccpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website, comicbookcouplescounseling.com, or follow us on all the socials at CBCC Podcast.
You can give us the gift of 5 stars on Audible or Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to do an act of service, why not write a review of the show while you're there? We are fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. It really warms our hearts and helps the pod.
So until next time, friends, keep your love tank full.
And your psychic rapport open.
Doopy doopy bum bum ba da bum bum ba da ba.
Forgot to hit record.
Are you shitting me?
I am.